Good. So here we are at Parashat Naso. Naso is the second Torah reading in Bamidbar, and it continues with preparations for moving on from leaving Mount Sinai and starting the march to the Promised Land. But it has, besides that introductory section, it then has a whole bunch of legal sections that have to do with the camp itself, maintaining the purity of the camp, and then also dealing with a number of personal situations or interpersonal situations. One is that we have a section on what's called the sotah. The sotah is somebody who strayed away from her husband, although the description is already a loaded description, because the whole point is that we don't know whether she did. It's just that the husband is jealous of his wife. He has warned her not to hang out with somebody, and he knows that she has fraternized with this guy, and he suspects an affair, but he has no proof. So there's this trial by ordeal, where the woman has to prove that she's innocent. She says that she's innocent, but in order to be fully believed, she has to go through this process where she drinks this special potion, and if she survives it, then she's innocent, and if she doesn't survive it, then that proves that she's guilty. A lot of commentators have pointed out that that means that 99.9% of the time, drinking some water with some schmutz in it is not going to kill you. So that means that 99.99999% of the time, this special voodoo kind of ceremony will actually prove that she's innocent. It's almost guaranteed to prove that she's innocent, unless she herself has such a guilty conscience that she ends up, kind of having, sympathetic symptoms that are bad. But anyway, nevertheless, it gives a lot of power to the jealous husband, and it puts the woman on the defensive. It's a distressing story. It's a story that ends up with laws. You should just know that the rabbis discontinued this ceremony. They refused to administer it because they explained that the only way that this ceremony makes any sense is if the men in society are so above any suspicion themselves that we should give them credence when they say that they're upset with something. But if the men themselves are guilty of unfaithfulness and immorality and so on, so why should we believe them and not the woman? So they interpreted the context of the Torah's ritual as requiring an impossible standard to meet, that the men should be absolutely above reproach. And since they said in our society, we know people fool around all the time, and the men are not saints at all, so therefore the man no longer has any believability to bring such a challenge, and therefore we don't administer the ritual. So this was done almost 2,000 years ago. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made that step. The next piece of legal teaching that we have is another unusual kind of situation, and that's the Nazirite. A Nazirite is, and it could be a man or a woman, and the Torah even explicitly says that this could be anybody, man or woman, who decides to take upon themselves an ascetic, holy kind of way of life, and they're going to avoid drinking wine and so on. So they're going to cut off a lot of life's enjoyments. And the Torah says, well, if you want to do that, it's a vow that you take to be this. And the Torah is always serious about vows. Whatever vows you take, you have to fulfill. So this is a very specific category of a vow, which has its legal definitions about what you can or can't do. And this person has to abide by their vow. And then there's the period of time that they live that way. And then the Torah says, and then your vow will be over, because the assumption is that you'll take this vow for 30 days or for a year or for some specific amount of time. And then when you're finished, you have a ceremony that sort of de-sanctifies you and brings you back into the regular world. And the rabbis, again, were very ambivalent about this phenomenon. On the one hand, the Torah gives this person the opportunity to live kind of a saintly, hermetic life. But on the other hand, the Torah uses language which says that it's really a sin to do that. And that, but it's a holy sin. You know, people sometimes go to extremes for whatever reason. They think they need it psychologically for themselves in order to, address some underlying issues that are bothering them. So they have to go a little bit further out than other people, like avoiding wine. For most people, I think most people statistically, so having a glass of wine is not the biggest deal in the world. But for some people, if they have an issue, then not drinking wine is like zero. No, nothing. You can't touch anything. So there's a certain kind of going to an extreme in order to address a problem. But nevertheless, the Torah says you shouldn't voluntarily do this. And the rabbi said, the world is there to be enjoyed within basic guidelines. The Torah gives us those guidelines. We should eat. We should have sexual relations. We should be able to drink. But clearly, certain things are forbidden. That's what kashrut is about. Marriage is the arena for our sexual lives. But the first mitzvah in the Torah says that you should never be celibate, because you should try to be in a family. This is, the Torah has a very positive orientation to the world within guidelines, within holy parameters. After that, we have the little beautiful section of the priestly blessing, also the threefold blessing. So that's given to us. And of course, it's couched as something that the priests have to do. So again, we're talking about things that are ritually, associated. Then we have a long section of the consecration of the tabernacle of the Mishkan, with everybody bringing their final gifts and their final initiatory sacrifices. Each tribe is given a chance to offer their first-time sacrifices as a way of consecrating the Mishkan. And we have a long reading. On the first day, it was Yehuda, right? On the second day, it was Yisachar. On the third day, it was Zvul, et cetera, et cetera. And it basically follows the way that the tribes were encamped, as we had last week, 3 tribes on each side of the tabernacle, so that there are 3, on 4 sides, it's 12 tribes. And every day it's the same sacrifice, but a different tribe. And this is the way that the Mishkan is brought into its existence. Chanukah HaMizbeach, the dedication of the altar. The word Chanukah, like we have Hanukkah, right? The new dedication of the temple. So that's the end of our Torah reading. Okay, that God speaks to Moses. Now the Mishkan has been consecrated, and now Moshe goes into the tent of meeting and can hear God speak to him and get even more Torah. So that's the whole Torah reading. It's got a lot. So it's a lot in it. What?
Rabbi?
Yes.
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's David. It's David Canigas.
How are you?
So is this then a continuation or a pickup? I don't know how to ask this question. It's a consecration of something that was fundraised in Parshat Truma, then?
Yeah. This is the Torah is a little lopsided.
Yeah.
We once we get to Mount Sinai, we get the Torah, then we have our problems, then we get the instructions to make a tabernacle. The rest of the book of Exodus is all about building the tabernacle. The whole book of Leviticus is different discussions that start with what are the rules of how you use the tabernacle, and then it expands out into holiness rules that go beyond that, but are always rooted in the tabernacle. And now the fourth book, the book of Bamidbar, takes place right after all of this has been established, and this is now the time when the tabernacle is finally completed and is to be put into use and to be brought along from one place to another as we start marching into the Holy Land. So the first four books of the Torah take place within the first year and a half. Well, not the first, the Genesis is Genesis. But once we get out of Egypt, so from that part of Exodus through Vayikra and through Bamidbar, we're talking about a year, a little bit more than a year's time. And then we skip. By the time we get to the end of Bamidbar, there's another 38 years because of the wandering, because of the sin of the spies, and we have nothing reported about that. We have the declaration by God, okay, you're going to wander in the desert for a generation and die out. And then the next thing we know, we're at the banks of the Jordan, 38 and a half years later. Moses is about to die, and he gives us the whole last book of the Torah. So there's a real asymmetry, there's a real imbalance in how much we get from one period and how much we get at the end. And there are 38 years basically of nothing. Torah basically doesn't give us any reports of what's happening during those 38 years. So yes, so everything that we're still doing at the beginning of the book of Bamidbar is right smack next to the idea that we just finished the Mishkan and we're getting it ready. We just had a lot of things to talk about. The manual is very thick. So it's just taken us a long time in terms of Shabbos readings to read through the user's manual for the tabernacle and for being a community that's trying to, reestablish itself as a holy community.
Yeah.
So now we get to the Haftorah, right? So, and the question will be, what can we possibly choose to make, an appropriate extra reading, complementary reading, or some kind of provocative reading that sheds some light back on the Torah reading, but from a later section of the Tanakh, someplace from Navi. Okay, so we're on page 813, 813 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. This is chapter 13 in the book of Judges. And we skip actually the first verse, which I will read to you anyway, just to get a sense of the way that the chapter divisions go. 13, I'm sorry. Yeah. So in our traditional way of separating out sections of Tanakh, this little section is a freestanding section. later on in the Christian editors of the Tanakh, they're the ones who created the chapter divisions. So they decided to put this as the first verse of chapter 13 rather than the last verse of chapter 12. And it simply says, the Israelites again did what was offensive to the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. So that's the whole business. Before that, chapter 12 gives us these judges, because we're in the book of Judges, different judges who have who came up temporarily to save the Jewish people from times of trouble, and they succeed, then they fail, and the Jewish people keep on never getting their act together, and God is angry at them and punishes them by putting them under the rulership of the Philistines. So that's the background. Chapter 13, verse 2 is a whole new section in our way of looking at it. It's a new parasha, so to speak, a new portion, and it tells a story. So first of all, we should just notice that the book of Judges is not one of the most usual books that we take haftorahs from. Most of the time, we've been looking at the big guys, right? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, those three major prophets are the heart of the section of the Tanakh called the Nevi'im, the prophets. And that's where we get, 90% of our haftorahs. But then every once in a while we get a haftorah from one of the historical books. So we get sometimes a haftorah from the book of Samuel, because that gives us the life of David. And then the book of Kings is David, and then Solomon. So, we have some of the big heroes in some of the historical books that can give us texts that might be of interest. The book of Judges is very rare to be used as a haftorah source, but here we are. So we've looked at this haftorah before because it's a dynamite story. It's really wonderful. And we will read it now again. And of course, the question will always be, why is this chosen? Why is this appropriate? And what does it do in dialogue with our Torah reading? What do we end up learning? So, book of Judges, chapter 13, verse 2, there was a certain man. And who's going to read for us?
I'll read.
Thank you.
There was a certain man from Zorah of the stock of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren and had borne no children. An angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "You are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or other intoxicant or to eat anything impure. For you are going to conceive and bear a son. Let no razor touch his head, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb on. He shall be the first to deliver Israel from the Philistines."
Okay. So do we have a sense of maybe what connection we can establish between this and Torah reading? Yes. What is it?
Well, with the Nazirite.
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 Yeah.
So of all the different sections that we have in our Torah reading, which has so many different pieces, the Haftorah decides that, the tradition decides, okay, let's focus on only one of them. Let's look at the Nazirite section. So here is a story that, from the traditional perspective, happens years later, after the institution of a Nazirite is well known among the people. And now it's being brought up in this particular family. Okay, what do we know about the family?
We know very little about the family.
So what do we know? This is easy.
We just know that they have that the woman couldn't have children.
Well,
nameless wife.
Who? What?
Oh, well, we know the lineage. Right, they're from one of the tribes of Dan.
What else do we know? We know the name of the husband.
Right.
We know the name of the husband. The husband's name is Manoach. Right? Manoach means sort of like restfulness, like menucha. Right? Yona Matzavo Manoach. So to rest, right? Like Shabbat Menucha. So his name is restfulness. So we're introduced to this guy who we know where he derives from. He comes from the tribe of Dan. He originally came from Zorah. The English Zorah is like totally unindicative of how you're supposed to say the word in Hebrew, right? And actually, we don't really quite know where he is living, unless he really is living right now in Zorah. Was he born in Zorah and then he went someplace else? It just says he was from Zorah, Zorah, and from the Dani family. Right? So we're introduced to this guy. What would we expect to see happen if we just have that? Hold on, sorry. One second. Sorry. Okay. So this first half of a verse introduces us to a man, but what happens in this whole first paragraph? What happens to the man?
The focus shifts.
Right. Not there. Instead, we have the nameless wife of Manoach, right? She has no name, but she ends up being the person who the story begins talking about. Right? So we have a little bit of a switcheroo, right? A little bit of a storyteller's, trick, right? So anyway, what is the woman told?
What is her what?
What is the woman? She receives a communication. She's told something.
She's going to conceive.
But right, so an angel comes. And this is very biblical, right? Right? From their perspective, this reminds us of like Abraham and Sarah and stuff like that, right? But of course, she still doesn't have a name. She's barren, just like the matriarchs. And she gets a messenger from heaven that she's going to have a son. Okay, and then we bring in the Nazirite stuff, right? So even though this is a clear connection to our Torah reading, there's also a clear difference between the way the Torah talks about being a Nazirite and the way we're being introduced to a Nazirite here. What's the major difference? Sarita, you're nodding your head.
Choice.
Choice.
This the boy is to be a Nazirite right from then, no choice, and also the woman is told to conform to some of the regulations for the Nazirite, and she's not choosing that either.
Right. So in the Torah, it's very explicit, and it's very, very important that this is a vow that is being taken by a person because they want to do this. You can have all your friends trying to tell you it's a bad idea. The rabbis think it's a bad idea. But nevertheless, I want to do it. Okay, if you want to do it, then we're going to let you do it, right? But this here now is completely different. There's going to be a person, a boy who's going to be born as a Nazirite without asking his permission, right? That's it. And she, as the mother, must act out certain of the Nazirite limitations for the sake of her son. It's not even for her own sake, right? The whole point of a Nazirite is that they're doing it because they need to do this for themselves. So here that whole dimension is taken out. And instead we have a woman who's being given a gift. She's been barren all this time. We can safely assume that she wanted to have a child. And now she's getting the news, but the gift of the child is very, very conditioned, it's controlled, that she has to comport with these rules so that her son will start his life as a Nazirite. So very strange.
And also, it's not limited. I mean, it seems like this is going to be his condition in life. So
Right.
the Nazirite is very specific that you're choosing to do this, but it's self-limited.
Right. And I think that they go hand in hand. If you've got the choice to do this or not, then you also can control how long you want to be a Nazirite for. So you can end it after 30 days, after 6 months, like I said, whatever time limit you want to put on it, you're putting it on because you're starting it out from scratch, and then it'll end. But here, this kid is not in control. They are born with this condition, if we could use such a horrible kind of phrase that has medical associations with it. They're born into a certain identity. Well, so maybe that's not as terrible, right? If we're born into being Jews, well, that's it. We have no choice about it. He's born into being a Nazirite, and therefore he has no control over being a Nazirite, so he can't end it. It's not up to him to make the rules. They're being completely foisted on him from above.
But she's
Okay.
being given this honor, and obviously she is going to have to do things to help him, because he's going to the first to deliver Israel from the Philistines. I mean, she's being given quite an honor, and she's going to have to be able to do this. And
Right.
we have to see whether she's willing. I think she's willing, but let's see.
Right. So, and this echoes something else that we have back in the old days, when the matriarchs all start out being a barren, except for Leah, but Rachel and Rebecca and Sarah start out as being barren. And with Rebecca specifically, when she has her turnaround, and she gets pregnant, and then it's a terrible, awful pregnancy that she has, God tells her, because this is not a personal experience that's just your business. This is, you have two nations in your womb, and there's going to be a whole historical struggle between the nations. So you have no choice also, right? Rebecca has no choice. You're going to have two children who are not just going to be your two little boys who you're going to be doting over. No, they actually have a historical role to play. And the same thing here. She's being told, okay, you're going to have a child, but your child is not going to just be your little boy. He's going to have a mission in life that is foreordained, right? It's meant for him from the beginning. Again, no choice. Just like he has no choice about being a Nazirite, he has no choice, but he's going to have to be the person who's going to try to extricate, to liberate the Jewish people from the Philistines. Right? That's why that little verse beforehand was a good background for us to know. Okay. So what's her reaction? What does she say when she hears this news?
The woman went and told her husband.
Hey, that's not the answer. The answer is we don't know.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's not recorded. Like with Sarah, when she hears that she's going to get a kid, she laughs, right? And when Rebecca is feeling the pain so she goes to God. She goes, tell me what's going on here, right? Here, she gets this amazing news, very strange kind of news. And the next verse is 6.
Woman went and told her husband, a man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God, very frightening. I did not ask him where he was from, nor did he tell me his name.
Okay, how is this angel the opposite of the man? The man in the story is a person that we were introduced to at the very beginning by telling us his name and telling us where he's from. Right? There was a certain man who was from Tzorah, and this is his name. We know his name, we know where he's from. Now the woman says, there was this strange being, a man of God. She doesn't say an angel. She says, a man of God. I have no idea what his name is. I have no idea where he came from. Right? But he told me something. Okay. He said to me,
you are going to conceive and bear a son. Drink no wine or other intoxicant and eat nothing impure, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death.
Okay, so pretty accurate, right? That's a pretty fair summary of what the angel said. Okay.
Well, almost. She extrapolates that this is a forever thing. That wasn't said explicitly, but she doesn't convey what sort of his mission, what the boy's mission will be about delivering Israel from the Philistines.
Excellent. So it leaves out one important point. She leaves out what his job will be, historically speaking, that he's going to be a savior for Israel against the Philistines. She just tells him about the day-to-day, this is how we're going to have to take care of this kid, and this is how we have to watch. If you're, to use a kind of a difficult analogy, you find out that your child is born with a food allergy. So that becomes your focus. The two of you then, if you have somebody else raising the child with you, we have to always watch out that our child doesn't eat nuts or whatever it is. Right? So that's the kind of situation that's being put out here. So she's telling her husband, this is our setup. Right? And she doesn't go off into the future. And we should wonder about that. Let's see what happens when we get to the rest of the story.
Manoah pleaded with the Lord. "Oh, my Lord," he said, "please let the man of God that you sent come to us again, and let him instruct us how to act with the child that is to be born." God heeded Manoah's plea, and the angel of God came to the woman again. She was sitting in the field, and her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman ran in haste to tell her husband. She said to him, "The man who came to me before has just appeared to me." Manoah promptly followed his wife. He came to the man and asked him, "Are you the man who spoke to my wife?" "Yes," he answered. Then Manoah said, "May your words soon come true. What rules shall be observed for the boy?" The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "The woman must abstain from all things against which I warned her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, or drink wine or other intoxicant, or eat anything impure. She must observe all that I commanded her."
Okay, so let's now pay attention to the ins and outs of this part of the story. Okay, so the wife has come back to her husband. She faithfully tells him as much as he needs to know. And then his reaction is that he's bowled over. He prays to God, "Oh my God, please let that man of God that just come again and let him instruct us how to act." Well, he did already instruct us how to act, didn't he?
Yeah, he's saying the same things.
Told the woman everything that they had to do. But that's not enough for Manoah, right? Manoah says, "I need it again. Come again, and I need to hear it also," right? So what happens?
So, the angel conveys to her certain things that that in terms of her eating and drinking, that she needs to refrain from, I guess, just for while she's pregnant. That's not clear. And then the angel actually gave some details about not cutting or razoring the hair. She didn't convey that.
Okay, so that's interesting. Okay,
Right. So
another
right,
point that we noticed.
but that's it. I mean, there's really not a lot of details then about is there some special way that you're supposed to raise this child?
Well,
What does it mean that to raise him as a Nazirite?
Except that if you know the laws of the Nazirite, then you know. Basically, so the razor, for instance, is part of the Nazirite laws in the Torah. So what's important here is that it's going to be initiated with her abiding by some of these rules. And I think, again, you could understand it that she's not a Nazirite, and she's just the mother of a Nazirite, and she's therefore carrying this unborn Nazirite, so she's going to abide by certain rules. And then he needs to be treated like a Nazirite from the day of his birth on, right? From then on. So that means that all of the things about cutting the hair and the grape products and not becoming impure, all of that is included in the word Nazirite. And you're supposed to know that. But Manoach says, give it to me again, right? It's not enough that my wife got told. Please, God, send the man again so that we can hear this explicitly. At which point, what should we expect? We should expect, and the angel of God came to Manoach and told him, read my lips. I already told the woman all the rules. So let me tell you again, if you want me to, to answer your call, okay, so I'm being nice to you. Is that what happens?
No.
No. What happens is, and again, the storyteller is having a little bit of fun. God heeded Manoach's plea, and the angel of God came to the woman again without Manoach around. So everything that Manoach really wants, he's not getting, right? When God hears Manoach's plea, he says, sure, I'll come again. But guess what? I'm really not interested in talking to you. You're a minor player in this, right? So I'm going to come to the woman. The only reason Manoach gets to know what's going on is because he has this very faithful wife who immediately runs to get him so that she can, bring him over and he can finally hear what's going on. So it's not God who's doing any effort to reveal the instructions to Manoach. It's all based on the fact that the woman wants to make sure that he's included. So that's, it's an interesting turning around of the roles. The woman is absolutely dedicated to serving her husband. She participates in a very, in that society where women were the helpers, the secondary people. Manoach totally believes that he's the main guy. God should be talking to him. So and that's not what's really happening. But as a result of his wife's help, he gets it.
And the woman still has no name. And the woman still has.
She won't have a name. Forget it. That's the reality. Yep.
That really reinforces that, because he's the named person who's being ignored. She's the nameless person who's being spoken to.
Let's look again and he says to the man, are you the man who spoke to my wife? Right? And there's a kind of proprietary sense to that. Like, no, she's my wife, exactly. Hello, you have something to say it to me. Who are you? Right? And then the angel of the Lord said to Manoach, verse 13, right? Yes. Oh, and he says, so Manoach says, so he goes, yes, are you the man? He says, yes. So then Manoach says, so, okay, what rules shall be observed for the boy? The angel says, the woman must abstain, etc. Whatever I told her, she's got to do. You are irrelevant. Right? You don't have to, you can drink your wine all you want. You can go to the pub every night. It doesn't matter, right? It all rides on whether she's going to abide by these instructions or not. Okay? So she must observe all that I commanded her. I commanded her, not you. She must observe the commands. It's none of your business. So that's what's playing out here in this story as well. So let's finish it up, and then we'll have appreciate it. I hope even more little features here. Go ahead.
Manoach said to the angel of the Lord, Let us detain you and prepare a kid for you. But the angel of the Lord said to Manoach, if you detain me, I shall not eat your food. And if you present a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord. For Manoach did not know that he was an angel of the Lord. So Manoach said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name? We should like to honor you when your words come true. The angel said to him, you must not ask for my name. It is unknowable. Manoach took the kid and the grain offering and offered them up on the rock to the Lord. And a marvelous thing happened while Manoach and his wife looked on. As the flames leapt up from the altar toward the sky, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flames of the altar, while Manoach and his wife looked on, and they flung themselves on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord never appeared again to Manoach and his wife. Manoach then realized that it had been an angel of the Lord. And Manoach said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen a divine being. But his wife said to him, had the Lord meant to take our lives, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from us, nor let us see all these things, and he would not have made such an announcement to us. The woman bore a son, and she named him Samson.
Oh, wow.
The boy grew up, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord first moved him in the encampment of Dan between
Sarah,
Sarah and Eshtaol.
Wow.
and that's the end of the story. That's the end of this introductory story. This is the prelude to the life of Samson, to the life of Shimshon.
Wow.
This is the birth story of Shimshon. But let's go now, and again, like I said, there's so much to appreciate here. Again, this is like a very, like I say, I really love this storyteller who put this story together. There's a lot of thought that's been put into how to, and a lot of enjoyment in the back and forth of playing expectations and who knows what's going on, and between the listener or reader, that's us, and Manoach and his wife and the angel of God. There's a lot of wonderful energies that are going back and forth. So, and echoes, biblical echoes, right? Manoach says, oh, let me go run and bring some food for you. Like that's our Abraham story when he meets the strangers. Right? But of course, those three strangers who were also angels, and Abraham didn't know it in the beginning, but they stay and they eat, right? Here, the angel doesn't stay to eat. He says, I'm not interested. Just worship God and don't worry about me, right? Something that Abraham was not in danger of making a mistake about, right? So, but Manoach, the angel, knows he's like this, man of the earth kind of guy, and he might end up getting so inspired by the fact that this angel is here that he would, slip a little bit maybe in his, worshiping of God, and maybe worship the angel instead. So no, just worship God. Don't go. And of course, this is one of the big fights. Israel is constantly, backsliding and not worshiping God. And that's why the Philistines are in charge now as a punishment, because they're not being loyal to God. So here we have this little vignette of a simple couple who, in their basic decency and innocence, are ready to worship God. So in that sense, it's a very nice little, a feel-good story. One of those human interest stories in the newspaper that gives you a little relief from the rest of the headlines. Now the headlines are Philistines are making our lives miserable, and we have nothing to eat, and everything is bad, and society is falling apart. And here we have this little human interest. There's these two little people out there who are very nice and decent and good people. But then we have this comparison between what Manoach seems to understand and what his wife seems to understand, right? So how do we compare Manoach and his wife at this point?
I think Manoah, that his wife is just so happy that she is going to have a son, and
She'll do anything.
Right, and he's a little bit worried, right? He sees, these dangers that, oh my God, we've encountered God. This is very dangerous. He's got a certain kind of, again, I would say almost a kind of a folk set of reactions. We know from the Torah, if you see God, you're going to die. We just saw an angel of God. He's making the big mistake, right? You don't see an angel of God and die. If you see God, you might die. And the angel says, don't mistake me for God. He can't help it. He's on this like superstitious kind of, wavelength. But what does his wife tell him?
That you're not going to die. He wouldn't have come and done all this if we were going to die.
So what's the underlying text of that?
She's accepting.
And what is she telling him? She's telling him what?
Don't be
Don't worry.
ridiculous.
Don't be ridiculous.
Ridiculous, yeah.
Or honey, you're
This
an
is a
idiot.
good thing.
You're being stupid. Don't you see what has happened here? We just got this amazing revelation. I'm going to have a baby. We never had that. We always wanted it. God is coming and giving us this gift. This baby is going to be this holy person who's going to be special and lifted up among it. And you think that this is all in order to kill us. No, use your head. Right? So there's this kind of gentle, and she's loving. She never walks out on the guy. Right? She loves them. She's his mate, his partner. And this is we, right? He would not have made such an announcement to us. We're in this together. The angel keeps on saying, this is actually Manoach, with all due respect. Can you please just go back to doing whatever you're doing? I need to, just make sure that the woman knows what she has to take care of, right? And the woman is bringing him in. Come, meet the man. Come, she also apparently doesn't quite know some man of God, but she doesn't know that maybe that this person's an angel. And then finally at the end, she goes, God has communicated to both of us. Isn't this amazing? Let's be happy, like Lattice. Be happy. Be grateful. Be inspired. Don't be afraid. Right? And of course, the product of this event is Shimshon. So let's go back in the last couple of minutes that we have. Do we have any other ways of thinking about how this text talks back or talks along with, is in dialogue with our Torah reading? Is it just the Nazirite thing with its differences that connects our Torah reading with our Haftarah? Are there any other elements in the Torah reading that we might say are being, jostled by our Haftarah?
Yeah, I think it's also the relationships between the husband and wife.
Right.
In the Torah reading, we have a husband who is doubting his wife. But Noach also doubts, but in a different way. But this was the unnamed, the nameless woman. She speaks up on her own behalf. She's able to do that. She has, in some sense, she has more agency than the sotah is being given.
Absolutely. More agency and more respect.
Yeah.
The sotah is given no respect whatsoever, unfortunately. It's a very painful text to read. The man with his suspicions calls the shots. She is guilty until proven innocent. She has to be brought before God. And be subjected to, she has to drink this godly potion. Here we have a lot of these things flipped around and negated. She's the one who's to be believed. She's the one who God wants to talk to. She's the one who's trusted with having this child and raising this child in a way that the children of Israel depend on. If she messes up, then Samson will not be able to do whatever little bit he's able to do to save the Jewish people. So this is, it's a very slyly feminist text, right? It's with a lot of enjoyment and wisdom that's going, what are you going to do with these guys? They never really get it. The good thing here is that she somehow is able to function with her husband in a non-abusive way and in a harmful way. But there is, like Surya said, there's this tiny little tinge of jealousy that we could read in Manoach's, questioning the man. You're hanging out with my wife. What's so important here? Why aren't you bringing your business to me? There is a little underlying sense of suspicion, of jealousy, and that's the whole point. That jealousy is stupid. It's completely unfounded. In the Sotah text in our Torah, that jealousy rules the day. That jealousy has to be dealt with because there's no way of talking sense to this man. Your wife is telling you that there's nothing happening. She happens to be a friend of this guy. So what? And he can't hear it. So here, I want to see this man again. Well, God answers him and appears to the woman again, right? In the Sotah story, that would get the woman into a lot of trouble. But here, there's a trust, there's a healthiness in this relationship, and an imbalance, if there is an imbalance. The imbalance is between the intelligence and level-headedness of the woman and the simple-mindedness of the man. So there's it's just, to my mind, it's not, the Nazirite thing is the obvious hook, but there's also a very, underneath it, an implicit critique of the Sotah story as well. And, so I think it's a delightful little gem, and it stands, on its own. Of course, the Samson story is a darker and in the end a tragic story, but this little story is beautiful on its own merits. Yeah, Geraldine.
It's also, the woman's reaction is opposite that of Sarah's reaction.
What do you mean? Say more.
Well, Sarah laughed and didn't believe it was really going to happen.
So we don't quite have the same sense. She's not 99 years old.
Right. Well, that's true.
Right. So
We don't know.
Sarah is going, are you kidding? You know how old I am? You know how old Abraham is? Are you kidding? That we don't have here. And partly because there's no reason to think that she's not of childbearing age. She just hasn't succeeded until now. But you're right. She's very, like I said, level-headed. She's got a very level spirit, right? She's thoughtful. She listens to these, completely mind-blowing news. She doesn't bat an eye. She speaks quietly and thoughtfully. So she's got it all under control. She's not hugely emotional one way or the other. Her husband, on the other hand, is, oh my God, oh no, now we're gonna die for sure. And she goes, calm down, honey. Everything's gonna be okay.
But that's the opposite of Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah. And that's what gives her this stature, right? That's what gives her a lot of, she's got dignity to spare.
Yeah.
She doesn't even care about the dignity. That's the way she is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yesha koach.
Yes, Shikoa.
Night, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
How come I don't see the recording thing?